From the low desert in beautiful Tempe, Arizona, this is Politics and the Past coming right after Thanksgiving. Hopefully, everybody had a wonderful time with friends, family, and like me, needed to readjust their belt this morning. So
Yeah.
there's a couple of holes further down the line that I'm using. Yeah, hopefully everybody had a really great weekend and are now excited for the big push to Christmas.
Absolutely.
Joining me today is Jack Hinrichs from the Center for American Institutions. Jack has been a major part of this podcast since its inception and has been a regular guest. So, Jack, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you for having me again.
So, Jack is here for a couple of reasons. One is we are going to kind of reshape this format. The last couple of months have been a bit of an experiment,
Mm-hmm.
or a lot of an experiment,
Yeah.
I should say.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to restructure the format a little bit. Starting, I think in the new year, we are going to have, or beginning now, we're going to have regular Monday and Thursday podcast drops, at least up until Christmas. But um, in the new year, we are going to do on the Monday podcast, they're going to be more, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe less contemporary politics,
Mm-hmm.
maybe more big picture American history, the past part of politics and the past.
Yes.
Interviewing scholars, interviewing people who are making people who are involved in politics, that kind of thing. But like more so from a big picture American history perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And if you ever, if you get any more of my individual ramblings on the Constitution or something like that, that's going to be more of like a Monday kind of episode. On the Thursday episodes, Jack is going to be here, I think, every time.
Yep. You're getting so much more Jack than you ever bargained for.
Yeah. So Jack is going to be my co-host on Thursdays, and sometimes it's just going to be he and I having a conversation on taking advantage of Jack's really, frankly, impressive knowledge. And other times we're going to have other people on, frequently from the Politics and Leadership Club,
Mm-hmm.
or here at Arizona State University, or other people we might want to bring in. The purpose of the Thursday conversations are to be far more about contemporary politics.
Yep.
That doesn't mean we have to abandon the big picture, but if you're looking for a long discussion about originalism, the Thursday's probably not going to be where we find that. So without further ado, this is maybe our opening for this is going to straddle both the past, politics and the past for a Monday and Thursday. I'm going to take advantage of Jack's knowledge and his expertise in order to really dig into the state of the modern National Democratic Party in at the end of 2025,
Yeah.
I guess. To understand what the fissures are, what the divisions are, what maybe what the opportunities for the party are moving forward, where its liabilities are, and how it is likely to shape up in the run up to next year's midterm elections.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Jack, can you tell us a little bit about your experience in Democratic Party politics?
Yeah, my experience in Democratic Party politics goes back to 2016. I was 11, and that's when I started my first volunteering for the Democratic Party in Minnehaha County, South Dakota. I started going out every year to the Minnehaha County Fair with my grandparents, and we would pass out leaflets and circulate petitions, register voters, do all of that fun stuff. And then also that year, my old Cub Scout leader, a man by the name of Jamie Smith, ran for the state house in South Dakota as a Democrat. And I really respected him and really liked him and his family. And so my parents and I volunteered for him as well.
Excellent. So you came to the Democratic Party through your family, correct?
Yes.
Are you able to talk a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. I come from Maybe the most committed family of volunteers the South Dakota Democratic Party has ever experienced or ever enjoyed. My grandpa, my grandpa Tom, started volunteering for the South Dakota Democratic Party in 1972. South Dakota had a Senate election that year, and the Democratic nominee was a man by the name of Jim Aberesk, who was a congressman from South Dakota at the time, a lawyer, a activist and rabble rouser, and my grandpa was his very first campaign volunteer. And then my grandpa Tom and my grandma Darla actually met working for George McGovern. My grandpa at the time worked in Washington. He did some work for Senator Aberesk and some work for Senator McGovern. And my grandma had been Senator McGovern's Yankton County, South Dakota chairperson in his 1972 presidential campaign. And so after that campaign, my grandpa was sent by, I forget which one of the Senate offices, to Yankton County to sort of do some work there with the Democratic leadership. And that's when he met my grandma as a leader in the Yankton County Democratic Party. So I really thank Senator Aberesk and Senator McGovern for introducing my grandparents to one another.
That's amazing. So yeah, that really puts a whole new spin on the whole notion of a political family.
Yes, absolutely. It's a deeply rooted in democratic politics. The earliest picture of my grandma and my mom, when my mom was a very little baby, was at the South Dakota Democratic Convention when they were helping nominate Jimmy Carter for president. And then both my mom and my dad worked in Democratic politics for Senators Tom Daschle and Tim Johnson. And then here I am today. So there you go.
That's amazing.
Mhm.
So actually, this is probably a good time to maybe do a disclaimer
Yeah.
for the podcast moving forward and for this episode, etc. Jack, you do not speak on behalf of the Democratic Party, as far as I know.
I do not speak on the behalf of either the South Dakota Democratic Party, nor the Minnehaha County Democratic Party, nor the National Democratic Party. And I am certain that those three entities are very happy to hear that I do not speak on their behalf.
Right. So one of the great things about having Jack on the podcast is, although Jack is a partisan Democrat,
Mhm.
he is able to analyze things from a not just Democratic Party perspective. If Jack is not on here to do what people do on cable news, which is to issue talking points, which is to convince people to vote Democrat, Jack is on here to provide analysis,
Mhm.
and that's the and he's very good at it. And the reality is that if you don't um you need to almost be in something to some degree, maybe 1 foot in, 1 foot out, to really understand what's going on with
Mhm.
side of a party, and so Jack act really is able to give that perspective on the Democratic Party. So that's really useful for not just this podcast, this discussion, but also moving forward. As Jack is on every week, I expect Jack is going to occasionally fight the Democratic corner, and
Yep.
that's good.
Mhm.
Um,
Somebody's got to.
Somebody has to, right? I I I guess I should be straight up as far as I'm concerned about what I'm gonna do. If I think that Jack is perhaps getting into talking point territory, or if I think that Jack is issuing something that there is a useful counterpoint to from the other side,
Mhm.
I will do my best to offer it.
Mhm.
Um, I'm a political independent. In fact, I'm a political foreigner, so that makes it really easy.
Yeah.
Because I'm Canadian, I don't actually have any partisan affiliation,
Mhm.
but I will seek to correct Jack if necessary.
I appreciate that. I always felt that the old McLaughlin group really could have benefited from some Canadians. And if they had Canadians on Crossfire, if Russert had just had more Canadians on, man, those programs would have been of much higher quality.
Maybe or maybe not. I don't know. It depends on the Canadian. But anyway, so but I say all that to say this, don't think that you're coming on if you're listening to this, you're gonna be listening to party propaganda. That's never the purpose of this.
No.
Jack is not on. I didn't invite Jack to do this because he's a Democrat. I invited Jack to do this because he's a fantastic analyst. and he's the example of the type of students that we shape here at Center for American Institutions, Politics and Leadership Club. And he just frankly has a degree of knowledge that a level of knowledge that I don't have, particularly about the Democratic Party, but also about American politics in general. So, very happy to have Jack join me, and we will, I'm sure, have some partisan Republicans on as we move forward.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so public disclaimer out of the way. All right,
Hmm.
Jack, what is your sense of where the Democratic Party was 12 months ago? The National Democratic Party.
The National Democratic Party 12 months ago was in complete disarray. It was after the end of the Biden administration and the absolute bungling that was the Biden first running and then stepping aside and then Harris running. After that debacle, the National Democratic Party was leaderless, had entered into the exact scenario that they had spent the last 4 years warning everybody about, Trump's second term. Had entered into that exact scenario and had done so again without a leader, but more importantly, without a plan and without the public perception that they were even thinking about a plan. They entered into that second Trump administration, and everybody's looking to the National Democratic Party for guidance, and it doesn't appear as though they've given any thought to their response or their role in opposition or what they were going to do during this second Trump administration. The National Democratic Party, to all perceptions, had fallen down at every step of the political cycle in 2024 through the beginning of 2025.
Okay, so it's not just the fact that the Democratic Party got, I'm going to use the word, I'm going to say thumped, but no party gets thumped in the 2020s.
Mhm.
Truly,
Yeah.
it wasn't a wipeout.
Yeah. Mhm.
We're not talking Reagan or Roosevelt or Lyndon
Mhm.
Johnson degrees of
Yeah.
wipeout. And I can't remember how the House of Representatives stacked
Mhm.
in the wake of the election, but I think the Republicans had what, maybe a 10-seat majority,
Yeah.
something like that,
Something
10 or
like that.
10-seat majority.
Mhm.
So we aren't talking about a party being truly banished to the wilderness,
Yeah,
yet it felt like it was being banished to the wilderness.
absolutely.
Why did it feel like that?
I think that there was a sense, Trump was coming back. And if you are a partisan Democrat, if you are on the left wing of American politics, that was something that you had feared. Um, and sort of the unknown of it, it was sort of this impending thing. And you didn't know exactly what he was going to do, but you knew that you weren't going to agree with it, certainly. And then B, I think there was the sense that as bad as 2020 was for Democrats, or pardon me, 2024 was for Democrats, there was the sense that it was very nearly a lot worse. And so if you look at the returns out of New Jersey, for example, Donald Trump almost won New Jersey. It was in the mid single digits, and it was within 10 points or 15 points in Illinois and states like Oregon. These states that you think of as solidly Democratic. And so the thinking is, well, we just suffered this incredible loss. And if things get any worse, we might be losing New Jersey or Illinois. Like what are we supposed to do then? And so to your point that it wasn't a true wipeout, I think that there was a fear amongst many members of the Democratic Party that it very quickly could turn into a wipeout if we didn't get our act together.
Yeah, it's also only the second time that a Republican had won the popular vote
Hmm.
since 1988.
And the conventional wisdom was that Republicans couldn't do that anymore, that changing demographics and young people coming into the voting block had made it so Republicans could only win the presidency via the Electoral College. And I remember reading in the post-2020 era any number of think pieces by highly respected political analysts and folks who appear on CNN saying a Republican will never again win the popular vote. And then a Republican did it. And that shocked Democrats that Donald Trump was able to win the popular vote.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think that, this is what created the existential crisis for Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
I think Democrats are in an existential crisis despite how well maybe
Yeah.
a month ago, but I think they're in an existential crisis. And I think it's because Democrats, since about the late 90s,
Uh-huh.
particularly picking up under Barack Obama,
Yeah.
have been operating under the assumption that that a certain type of democratic hegemony
Mm-hmm.
is inevitable.
Yeah.
That you mentioned the changing demographics. You mentioned young people voting, a certain generation maybe dying off of voters. The rain, we can call it the rainbow coalition thesis,
Uh-huh.
where as America got more diverse, as America got younger, that was all voters were going to move to the Democratic Party,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so that was creating the structural weakness for Republicans.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, Democrats might lose an election here or there,
Uh-huh.
right?
And the Senate would be a tougher
And the
lift.
Senate would be a tougher lift. But that overall, that like in national elections, the White House was basically Democrats to control,
Mm-hmm.
except for a very strange lightning striking like in 2016.
Yeah.
Or like in 2004, that's a weird election. It's George W. Bush was a war president,
Uh-huh.
right? You can kind of justify throwing that one away,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you're a national Democrat, it's easy to dismiss that one.
Yeah.
And in 2016, you can dismiss Trump's victory by like, listen, he pulled out a straight flush on the river,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so everything, absolutely everything had to go right for a Republican to win and
Mm-hmm.
get it by the skin of his teeth.
Yeah.
So if you're a Democrat in 2022, you're looking at the last 20 years and you're going, yeah, the Rainbow Coalition thesis is proving true.
And also because in 2022, to briefly build on that point, in 2022, the Democrats had a very good year. You had the House was not the disaster that it was supposed to be in a midterm election. You have this long history of midterm election shellackings for the party in the White House in 2018, in 2014, in 2010. The party who was in the White House is supposed to lose 30, 40 House seats, and that simply didn't happen. And you didn't see those same sort of losses in the Senate that we would expect. And as I recall, the Democrats picked up governor's mansions. And so I think an integral part of that is in 2022, the Democrats vastly outperformed expectations.
Right. And I think maybe and one of the reasons that they did well in 2022, I mean, I think they attributed it to Dobbs.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that that was actually the thing. That might have provided some energy,
Sure.
but what I really think you saw in 2022 is Republicans picking terrible candidates.
I think that it was I think that it was a mixture of those things, but I appreciate that you brought up the absolute failure of Republicans to nominate um, good candidates, because I think that is an under-discussed reason why they can't win or why they haven't won, pardon me, competitive races.
Right. Well, and so this I this is a contingent critique of why
Hmm.
the Republicans lost in 2022. I've got my historian brain
Sure.
there for a second. That you know what? The Democrats did well,
Hmm.
not because of some major structural change like that Dobbs
Hmm.
brings in or highlights even further that already existed,
Yeah.
but that in fact part of the reason that Democrats did so well is that in really close competitive races,
Hmm.
Republicans nominated a bad candidate.
Yeah. And that wasn't an aberration in 2022 when you think about Republicans nominating Todd Aiken, for example, in Missouri, or that Richard Mourdock in Indiana. Republicans have a long and storied history, particularly in senatorial contests, of nominating some some individuals who are prone to saying some pretty lunatic things.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think both parties have that ability to do so, but there have been Republicans recently have managed to perhaps outdo Democrats
Yeah.
on that. Or I should rephrase this. Actually, I'm going to rephrase this.
Hmm.
Because I mean, the Democrats did just nominate a guy for attorney general in Virginia, a
It,
guy who won,
yes.
who said some pretty horrible things.
Mm-hmm.
But there, I just want to say that there were a couple of election cycles where Republicans managed to nominate in a couple of key races the wrong guy.
Yeah.
We'll just leave it at that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, anyway, so 2022, the Democrats are feeling pretty good,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, and maybe and I mean, I think Democrats got the race they wanted. I think they wanted to face Donald Trump in 2024.
I certainly better than facing from an electability standpoint, and every Democratic primary revolves around the question of electability at this point. From an electability standpoint, the Democrats absolutely wanted Donald Trump over Nikki Haley or Chris Christie, any of those, more moderate, more traditional Republicans who could appeal to voters who had been Republicans but have since moved to the Democratic Party in the Trump era.
Right. And that, I mean, and that just built, but that built on the Rainbow Coalition thesis
Mm-hmm.
in their heads, where you've got suburban women who voted for Mitt Romney,
Mm-hmm.
who are now reliable Democrats.
Yes.
Um, so the tremendous future of Democratic hegemony is right around the corner, comrade. It's
Yeah.
uh so there's this hope to take on Donald Trump. Now, how does the Biden administration affect the internal workings of the Democratic Party?
That is an excellent question. President Biden, I believe, put in place individuals who were not necessarily ready for prime time, who were not necessarily ready to run the Democratic Party or to run elements of his White House. When you think about Harrison, Chairman Harrison of the Democratic National Committee, who was nominated by Joe Biden, um, I remember him spending a lot of time on Twitter, or what was then Twitter, um, defending Joe Biden from, online critiques by online leftists. And I'm sitting there thinking, this is not, I don't think that this is in the job description of a chairman of the Democratic National Committee.
Can you talk a little bit more about Chairman Harrison, like where he's from?
Yeah, he's from South Carolina.
Yeah,
And he ran a very competitive senatorial campaign against Lindsey Graham
in
in
2020.
in 2020. A shockingly competitive Senate campaign um, that many people, he didn't end up winning, and he didn't end up, I suppose, coming that close to winning. But the important thing is people thought in June and July and August that he might win. And that perception really bolstered his profile in the Democratic Party. And so after President Biden was elected and President Trump was defeated, and Jamie Harrison was now unemployed, President Biden nominated him to run the DNC, and he I believe that decision was due to a critique that I have of the Obama administration and the leadership of the Democratic National Committee under President Obama, where they really emphasized focusing on competitive races instead of focusing on competing for every race in every state. Previously, in Democratic National Committees led notably by Howard Dean, there was an emphasis on competing everywhere, running candidates in every race, even races that we knew the Republican was going to win by 50 points, on the basis that the Democratic Party is only strong if we make a point of advocating for our principles in every constituency. So every Democrat, even if they live in the most red area of the country, feels that they are included or seen by the DNC. And that philosophy was completely scrapped by the Obama administration, Democratic National Committees. They moved all of their resources to competitive races. And as a result, Democrats in places like South Dakota, in state legislative campaigns, Democrats who had been holding on to competitive but red-leaning seats all of a sudden didn't have any money to fight those races anymore. And so you saw all of these, red state Democratic legislative caucuses just absolutely get cut to shreds. because they weren't getting any attention or resources from the Democratic National Committee. And I believe that the nomination of Harrison by Biden was an attempt to correct that by nominating an individual who had fought and campaigned in a solid red state. President Biden, I believe, was saying we're going to move to the pre-Obama thesis of Democratic campaigning. Unfortunately, Harrison wasn't the guy to do it. And I think it speaks to um, a broader tendency of President Biden to have maybe good intentions, but to nominate the wrong person for that job, and who ultimately bungles the goal. To
Interesting.
give a very long-winded answer to that question.
No, that's a really good answer because I was going to ask about Democratic Party governance, which is
Mm-hmm.
not something that maybe people think about very
Oh,
much, but the
yeah.
actual internal workings, the apparatus of the party. Okay. I was actually I wasn't at, I walked past a Harrison rally in 2020 in Greenville, South Carolina.
Sure.
It would have been August.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt energetic, and
Yeah,
you could kinda get that notion that there were Greenville Democrats who or, upcountry Democrats who hadn't felt represented in a long time.
absolutely.
It was
Yeah.
a chance to show out. Um, but anyway, but there is this notion, I think that this is a I don't know that it's, I'll give you another example. He sounds a little bit like Beto O'Rourke.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And there's nothing that a Democrat loves better than Beto O'Rourke.
The notion of the guy who
Mm-hmm.
the tantalizing thought that maybe this guy will or this girl will overcome
Mm-hmm.
this red demon
Uh-huh.
in some part of the country who's always appeared unbeatable,
Yeah.
but yet they never quite manage
They
to do
never,
so.
they're always 4 points away from doing
It
it.
never and so it's never like half a point,
Mm-hmm.
it's like 4 points.
It's always 4 points. Yeah, and it goes back to like that West Wingy mentality that Democrats have, that all it takes is the right person, the right articulate, charismatic person with good ideals, and they get out there and they do the work, and they can take on the world. And unfortunately, that's not how it works
Right,
all of the time.
right. Okay, so we've but the Democratic Party under the Biden administration, especially given the lingering apparent threat of the return of Donald Trump,
Mm-hmm.
had energy
Yeah.
despite whatever maybe, Chairman Harrison was doing online. It
Yes.
never seemed to be a shortage of energy.
No, absolutely not.
Where did the energy go?
The energy went online, I would say. At least the energy of is everybody's energy is going online these days. Where before, in sort of those pre-social media times, you might go to and form clubs with other Democrats, or you might go and attend rallies or become a volunteer. Now you post on Twitter, or what was Twitter, you post on Instagram or what have you, and that constant social media battle against individuals on the right who are doing the same thing for the same reasons, I think really depleted that energy, because that's ultimately that sort of social media battle of who can meme the best or who can win the day's news cycle on Twitter, who can get trending. That's not a winnable battle. That's not a winnable war, because A, there is no clear objective, and B, ultimately it's meaningless, and C, it requires your constant care and attention to even achieve a Pyrrhic victory. And so I think all of that energy was ultimately spent online, and it was sapped by social media.
Interesting. And doing it on X or Twitter
Mhm.
meant that all you were doing was lighting the pockets of Elon Musk.
Oh, it's incredibly ironic, and it speaks to, I think of Will Rogers. In the 50s, somebody asked Will Rogers, who was a famous American comedian at the time, which organized political party he was a member of. And Will Rogers said, "I'm not a member of an organized party, I'm a Democrat." And I think that you saw all of the disorganization of the Democrats on full display circa 2021, 2022 Biden administration Twitter. That level of energy wastage proves Will Rogers right.
I think, yeah, it might.
Hmm.
So you've got this energy being channeled online,
Yes.
right? And at the same time as you have a party that maybe Biden is trying to shift away from only focusing on competitive districts, which
Hmm.
usually means urban districts, suburban districts,
Yeah.
wealthier districts, meaning that the Democratic Party is frankly giving up on a great part of the country, on a
Oh, absolutely.
vast swath of the
Hmm.
country. Um, so and that only means that the Democratic Party is going to sound more online and more urban
Yes.
and
Hmm.
more, for lack of a better word, for lack of a better word, academic,
Yes.
maybe.
Hmm. Intellectual.
Yeah. How does that then shape the party's agenda
It,
going into 2024?
yeah, it does bring the party's agenda to the left in a very specific way, where I think too often individuals who analyze Democratic Party politics see it as this sort of continuum of, well, you're either further to the left and you're like AOC, or you're further to the right and you're like, say, Chuck Schumer. That's the favorite whipping boy right now, Chuck Schumer. Um, and you're right, you're at some point in between those two poles, and I think that is not an effective paradigm for analysis, because it ignores the fact that there are two very different left wings of the Democratic Party. In my view, there is the more economically oriented, more socialist wing of the Democratic Party. And in that wing, you would have people like Zoran Mamdani. And I think that wing currently is in an ascendancy. Whereas, and that is more recent. Whereas before, you would have individuals who were on the left, but they spent so much time online, they did not realize that there was actually a difference between things that happen on Twitter and things that impact real people's lives in the real world. And so those individuals adopted very aggressive, and I would argue performative, social campaigns that were oriented towards making sure everybody knew that you were on the left, and creating a media ecosystem that used phrases from the left, but didn't actually improve the lives of anybody, of any real people. I think about things like land acknowledgments, and where you had a big move during the Biden administration to include land acknowledgments, acknowledging the Native American peoples who lived in an area before it was settled.
Well, we forgot to do that before this podcast.
And we did forget to do that. But I've always thought, and certainly many of the individuals who include land acknowledgments have noble aims and intentions. But including a land acknowledgement hasn't actually improved conditions for any Native American or on any reservation in this country. What you're essentially doing is saying, well, I stole your land, and I am not going to give it back, and I am not going to help improve your poverty or the structural racism that has been created. I'm just going to acknowledge the fact that I stole your land.
Yeah, it actually creates it creates a situation where either it's entirely superficial,
Hmm.
in which case the Native Americans are going to see through it,
Yes.
or you actually mean to return the land, which is something that is never going to be able to happen.
Hmm. And so it was superficial gestures, performative gestures like land acknowledgments that more online left wing adopted, and ultimately, the American voting public, what Nixon would have called the silent majority, saw right through that, saw that it was ridiculous, that it was the product of this totally online culture, and voted against it.
Okay. Okay. So they voted against it in the 2019 Democrats voted against it
Mhm.
on the 2020 primaries, I
Yeah.
would say. Yet, how did the Biden administration not learn the lesson they somehow knew in 2019 and early 2020, and yet forgot the moment they were elected?
I think that goes back to the point of Biden hiring the wrong people to do the job. And so while Biden might have benefited from that in the primary, and ultimately in the general election. Um, when he was staffing his administration and staffing his communication staff, ultimately the individuals he hired were products of that of that more online element of the left wing. And so
Well, they're the ones with the degrees.
they're the ones with the degrees, and they were the ones with the connections. When you talk about like the influencer class or the Democratic consultants class, those folks were all on Twitter, and those folks were the individuals who knew where to apply for the jobs and knew the person who was conducting the interview. And so they're the ones who got hired, and they're the ones who ultimately shaped the Biden PR campaign that uh, really ended his presidency.
Yeah.
Yeah, he never, you know, you can think what you want about President Biden. I think he succeeded in some areas and failed in others, but his PR was a failure on every level.
Well, you know what? You know why I think that this is one of the major reasons I think it was a failure on every level?
Mm-hmm.
It's because the mainstream media had gotten so they're not leftist, but pro-Democrat
Mm-hmm.
out of fear, maybe out of fear of Trump, out of fear of other
Sure.
Republicans. That I'm not saying they didn't do their job. I'm not saying there weren't people in there who didn't work
Mm-hmm.
hard, but it was pretty easy for Joe Biden to get a pretty easy time of it
Mm-hmm.
from most media people.
Yeah.
And so you didn't actually have to have the best of the best in there
Mm-hmm.
to get away with it.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You could kind of go, oh, well, we need a warm body, and the media isn't going to be all that difficult on us. We're
Mm-hmm.
generally going to be able to get our talking points out there. We have David Brock and Media Matters. What more do we need?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that that speaks to a broader question of what the role of traditional media is.
Sure.
Like why does any person watch the CBS Evening News anymore? It used to be you watched the CBS Evening News because that was the only opportunity you got to see the news. Um, but now, when you can get any news you want of any political viewpoint you want on your phone or your computer at any time of day, why would anybody watch the CBS Evening News?
Remarkably, and I don't know if the stuff that I've seen,
Mm-hmm.
that a lot of people still do, and it is remarkable that if that both the local news
Mm-hmm.
and the national network news
Yeah.
tend to be the most trusted.
In like the local news is a different thing, I think, from the national news. I wonder how many people are watching the CBS Evening News versus how often the CBS Evening News is playing on a TV in a hotel lobby.
Fair point.
Um,
Fair point.
and so if you look at, but
That's the same for CNN and Fox.
no, and you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
I mean, I don't know how many airports I've walked through that's just CNN, banks of CNN TVs.
Oh,
Or,
absolutely. Yeah.
okay. So coming out of 2024, the party's facing an existential crisis.
Mm-hmm.
The Biden years, while energetic and seemingly promising, did
Mm,
not turn out well. All right, let me back up to the Biden years because I really want to get into the. You mentioned one of the key um, fissures in the Democratic Party, but let's talk about the Biden years generally. What were some of the things Democrats like that? Are there things that every Democrat loved about the Biden years?
I would say that Biden's domestic agenda, um, a lot of Democrats, particularly young Democrats, appreciated. The very same demographic of Democrats would later turn against him. In those early years, really appreciated that he did not adopt a liberal economic agenda. Instead, it was a leftist economic agenda, because President Biden was very explicit in saying, "Look, this globalization, this liberal consensus, has left a whole lot of people behind." And we need to correct that. And so for his economic agenda, he didn't hearken back to President Obama or to President Clinton. He hearkened back to President Franklin Delano Roosevelt
Maybe Lyndon Johnson,
and,
but
and also Lyndon Johnson. Thank you. Absolutely. And so when you look at things like Build Back Better or when you look at the CHIPS Act, which is not a liberal notion at all. Providing government subsidies for that is economically nationalist an idea as it comes, and I think that it was refreshing for many Democrats to see that sort of liberal agenda that had been so prevalent with President Clinton and President Obama had finally been discarded.
I think much to the perhaps not to the good of all, but
Yeah, and ultimately, like,
yeah, no, I
yeah,
agree you. I think it
mhm,
was, and I know that there were a lot of older Democrats who had resented the move
yes,
towards small L liberal
mhm,
market-based global economics in the party, the
yes,
we call the third way, in Britain, the
mhm,
Blairite movement, that they were, the party had returned to their part, the party of their youth.
mhm, absolutely. It was the party of Johnson, and it was the party of Roosevelt again.
Right. Um, Yet remarkably, this is a party who is more, who is popular in the areas that are doing very well economically,
Yes,
generally, and
yes,
trying to shape an agenda
mhm,
for people who are not doing well.
yes.
And yet they have very little presence on the ground in those areas.
Absolutely. I think back, Theodore H. White wrote a book called The Making of the President 1960. Theodore H. White was a reporter who covered that campaign. And if you haven't read it, I recommend you read it. It's an excellent book. In the beginning of that book, he writes about the progress of election night, and how election returns come in across the nation. They start in the East, and Democrats do well in the South, and Democrats do well in working class urban enclaves. And then the election returns sweep across the country, and you know that the Democrat is up when the election returns are coming from working class areas, are coming from poor farmers, are coming from factory workers, and the Republicans are doing well when the returns are coming from areas with wealthier populations, when the returns are coming from suburbs. And I read that section of White's book a couple of years ago, and I thought Theodore H. White would not recognize the Democratic Party at all. In I read that in 2024. He could not conceive of a Democratic Party that had a base in suburban America. He could not conceive of a Democratic Party that had a base of white salary workers. That would have been totally foreign to his experience. And I think that every Democrat ought to buy that book and read that section and really think about how the Democratic Party is now no longer the party of farm workers, the party of factory laborers. I think that it is something that individuals in the party really need to ruminate over.
Mhm. Okay, so the Biden administration is giving young people who've been, for whatever reason, maybe believe that economic nationalism
Hmm.
is the way forward, a left-wing version of economic
Yes.
nationalism. Elizabeth Warren maybe is
Uh-huh.
getting her preferred economic agenda.
Yes.
And young people are responding to that, to the
Hmm.
Democratic coalition. What are some of the what are there any other big victories that Democrats kind of universally saw?
Other I mean, it was really that domestic agenda because, as we all remember, President Biden's foreign agenda was a mess. And ultimately, beginning with the botched withdrawal from Afghanistan, and that's another example of President Biden putting the wrong people in charge and botching um, something that otherwise might have been popular. Americans, if you look at the polling before the withdrawal from Afghanistan, Americans wanted to withdraw from Afghanistan. But then the withdrawal was done in such a ham-handed way.
Yeah.
And then you get into the war on Gaza, which ultimately ignites, or the Israel-Palestine conflict, which ultimately ignites the young element of the Democratic Party against Joe Biden.
Yeah. Let's start with Afghanistan. I
Yeah.
mean, I think that the withdrawal was absolutely botched.
Hmm.
To some degree, I don't think that was the fault of the Americans
Yeah.
there. I think they didn't realize they sort of assumed it was going to be a Vietnam style situation where it was going to be a couple of years before the
Hmm.
Taliban retook Kabul. They didn't think it was going to be a matter of hours.
Yes.
And so, um, but I really don't think that the Biden administration, well, it getting out of Afghanistan looks popular.
Hmm.
The way you do it is going to affect that.
Absolutely.
People are supportive of getting out of Afghanistan in a very clean, very orderly style.
Hmm.
They were never going to it was not at all costs.
Yes. Hmm.
And I think that was something that I think Joe Biden misunderstood,
Hmm.
maybe,
Yeah.
that because he had always been supportive of getting out of Afghanistan for so long, well, he was vice president.
Hmm.
He just, I think, sort of had imbued this notion that all Americans wanted out of Afghanistan no matter what,
And wanted out of Afghanistan right now.
right now. Yeah.
Hmm.
Whereas I don't think most Americans actually felt that way.
Yeah.
And his approval rating never recovered from that.
No, it didn't.
That was probably the turning point of his presidency, frankly.
Hmm.
Okay. So the foreign agenda is a mess.
Yes.
But let's just stay on domestic for a second because
Hmm.
we can get distracted by the foreign one for a while.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about.
But all right, how are Democrats feeling about his immigration policies?
I think many Democrats I think many Democrats agreed with his immigration policies. And the Democratic Party is more open to immigration than the Republican Party, and that's something that's long been true. That's not
With the
necessarily.
exception maybe of the Reagan era and the early 90s,
Yes, thank you.
when unions were really opposed to more immigration
Mhm.
and the Republican Party was pro-immigration and the unions were very much against it.
That's an important caveat. I appreciate it. Ever since, say, the turn of the millennium. Um, and so many Democrats are used to being pro-immigration. That's sort of the culture that they have been in, for or the political atmosphere that they have grown accustomed to. And I think that many Democrats did not realize the strength of the anti-immigration sentiment that came from uh, other political spheres or other economic spheres. And I think that also speaks to the growing wealthiness of individuals who are Democrats, where if you have um, more anti-immigration sentiment amongst individuals who are in poverty, who feel the pinch or perceive the economic pinch of immigration. And you can argue about whether or not that is true, or that immigrants actually have that effect. But putting that argument aside, it is the perception that matters in politics, and poor Americans perceived immigration to be a threat to their economic livelihoods and thus voted for anti-immigration candidates. Wealthier Democrats didn't perceive that same pinch and thus didn't, I believe, understand that anti-immigration sentiment. And ultimately, personally, my politics are more pro-immigration. But I do think it was a failing amongst the Democratic Party sort of rank and file and going up into the consultant class to not recognize the strength of the anti-immigration sentiment.
Well, and one of the things that maybe the most brilliant political move we could talk about the calculation and the you know um, whether or not it was decent from a humanist perspective.
Mhm.
But one of the most brilliant calculated political moves was Greg Abbott's decision to ship um, recent migrants to
Mhm.
major blue cities, particularly New York City,
Yeah.
because New York City, Eric Adams, before this happens, says something along the lines of, we will always have enough room for immigrants in our city.
Mm-hmm.
Then 12,000 showed up, and he said, no more. We can't handle another one.
Mm-hmm. Or Greg Abbott. And again, like discussing the humanity perspective, personally, I think it's ridiculous to load immigrants onto a plane or onto a truck and ship them to Martha's Vineyard as a political ploy. But as a political ploy, sending all of these immigrants to Martha's Vineyard and saying, look, you wanted them, you deal with them.
Well, I mean, hey, at the same time, you're going to have to move these large amount of migrants across the country because they can't all sit in El Paso.
Yeah. And so saying, like, you voted for this, okay, deal with it, to these wealthier Democrats who didn't have that sort of understanding of immigration, who had seen immigration as more of an abstract issue, and sort of like lampooning that. I agree. It was bad humanity, but good politics.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it was done in I think it could have been done in a way that was not that was less performative. And if it had been done in a way that was less performative, then it probably could have been done in a more decent fashion.
Yes.
But of course, try to make everything performative tends to makes it about you and not about the people themselves.
Because you need to record TikTok videos of it, because you can't just invite the CBS reporter or the New York Times reporter to cover it because you need TikTok videos of it. It has to be performative.
Right. But okay. But immigration is creating a maybe isn't really digging into the rock solid Democratic core of the party, but there are the voters that are sort of one foot in, that are persuadable to vote Democrat, that this is an issue that hurt them.
Yeah.
I'm thinking particularly of people on the southern border.
Yeah.
That live on the southern border, where they felt like their concerns weren't being taken seriously. And of course, if you were part of the Biden administration, you say, we did take it seriously. It was like, yes, you did in 2024.
Yes. And you cannot, like the Biden administration, again, it goes back to questions of staffing, and it goes back to questions of policy implementation, where it just was not managed in the way that the American people wanted it managed.
No. And perhaps, and again, brilliant political move. I'm going to mention a brilliant political move here. One of the truly brilliant staffing political moves that the Biden administration made was that they recognized Biden was getting older, and he knew that the vice president was a threat, a political threat to him. And the way that he neutralized that threat was by putting her in charge of the border.
I agree.
It was a purely self-interested move. Like, I need to protect myself from her. I'm going to give her an impossible file, and she's going to say yes because I don't know.
Because she's ambitious and she has to.
She doesn't have to.
Well,
I think she
thinks, yes.
And that would have been a perfect example for anybody who ends up vice president who listens to this podcast. The thing you need to do from day one is fill your schedule.
Yes. Well, first of all, you need, when somebody asks you, hey, do you want to be the vice president? You need to say no, because it's the worst job.
Well, it is. However, it can be a stepping stone.
It can be.
But if you're going to do it, use it as a stepping stone. You need to, the moment you become vice president, you need to make sure that you have your own agenda that fills up your schedule. Because if you do not fill your schedule, the West Wing will fill it for you. And it will not be doing things that are good for you. It will be doing things that are only good for the president.
Yes.
And so you need to be in Kamala Harris's position in 2021 when Biden asks her to take control of the border. You need to be able to say, Joe, I think this is one of the most important issues, and I'm so grateful you asked me. The problem is I'm over here, I'm focused here, I'm more of an expert over here. This is better suited to my skill set. I have a guy in mind who you should give this.
Yeah.
And if the president pushes and pushes and pushes, there's not much you're going to end up being able to do about
it.
But you can at least protect yourself a little bit against that. All right. Anyway, brilliant political move, bad staffing decision, ended up being catastrophic during the 2024 election.
And we haven't gotten into the ridiculous cover-up of
Wow.
the in talking about like bad staffing decisions and staffing decisions that are ultimately bad for the party. The Joe Biden surrounding himself with loyalists
Right.
who ultimately hide his aging and and the effects of that from everybody.
Right. Now I just said to be before we get into this, I'm
Hmm.
just gonna say, so I think what we should do is we should finish with this.
Uh-huh.
I really want to get into this.
Yeah.
And then we want to talk about the lingering the imminent Democratic Civil War
Hmm.
or the existing Democratic Civil War within
Yeah.
the party. Let's hold on that for the next episode.
Hmm.
So we can take a whole episode on it
Yes.
because but I do want to finish on the cover up
Hmm.
aspect. And that I think is a good finishing point for because we want to save Israel Gaza for
Yes.
the
Hmm.
the imminent civil war.
Yeah,
Okay,
that deserves a longer treatment.
right. Okay, so the cover up.
Yes. As a Democrat at the time, like as a person who was getting ready to vote in that primary, I remember when Dean Phillips. Do we all remember Dean Phillips?
Well,
Was
no, not very many people do remember
not
Dean Phillips, but
it's
you and I
easy.
remember Dean Phillips.
Dean Phillips, for those of you who are fortunate enough to not remember Dean Phillips, was a congressman from Minnesota who says, you know what, Biden's too old. Biden can't win. The Democratic Party needs somebody else. It doesn't necessarily have to be me, and it shouldn't necessarily be me. But I'm going to get into this primary as a stand-in for all non-Biden alternatives. I am the field against Joe Biden. Um, and he is laughed out of the room. Everybody says you are bad for the party. Um, Joe Biden really isn't that old. You're making a mountain out of a molehill. You're just playing into Republican talking points. And ultimately, he gains no traction and he drops out in disgrace within Democratic circles. And I have as a confession to make, I was one of those people who was very angry with Dean Phillips in the time because I believed that Joe Biden or that the rumors or the perception that Joe Biden was too old and too senile was a fabrication created by Republicans or an image created by Republicans. I knew he was getting older. I didn't think it was that bad. And then the debate happens and you see Joe Biden unvarnished on TV for an hour and a half, and it's obvious that he just doesn't have it anymore. That he is slowed, that he doesn't have verbal dexterity anymore, that he just can't run for president and shouldn't be president, arguably. And so there were an incredible number of Democrats, myself included, who felt incredibly betrayed by Joe Biden in that moment. Because I had spent the last several years defending Joe Biden's mental acuity to those who criticized it. I made a point of going and voting for Joe Biden against Dean Phillips in the Democratic primary, and then it turns out actually it was as bad as everybody said. He was just hiding it from us. And that con job that the Biden administration staffers pulled on the Democratic Party faithful is something that I don't know how you really come back from. Once you lie to your voters, once you pull the wool over your eyes, or over their eyes, pardon me, you can't come back from that. And that distrust that stems from many things, but was ignited by the revelation that Joe Biden had in fact aged to that degree is, I think, one of the main reasons why the Democratic Party is now poised to go into this internal conflict.
Hmm. So you were you felt the compelled to defend Joe Biden,
Yes.
right? Going up
Mhm.
until the debate. I think like many other Democrats. I mean, my own perspective is, I mean, I'm a political outsider.
Mhm.
I watched a guy who was losing it.
Yeah.
I could see that he was, I don't have because I don't have partisan glasses on. Sometimes I can see things that
Sure.
maybe a little bit differently because there's no lens. I don't have the blue lens or the red lens on
Mhm.
the glasses at any point. and I do in my own country. I just don't do that.
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
So I'm no better than anybody else. I'm
Mhm.
just
Yeah.
uh,
It makes you a very good host for this
for
specific
this specific
podcast.
podcast. I watched a guy who clearly wasn't who he had been.
Yes.
I didn't think that was necessarily devastating.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what I thought was devastating is that all of the people coming out of those talking points were saying the guy's never been more brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, don't lie
Yeah.
to me.
You're just setting yourself up
Right.
for failure.
Right. I thought that he could have been managed through the election had the debate not happened, and had people said, "Listen, the guy's getting older."
Yeah.
Right? I can tell you though, like he's still got it when it matters.
Mm-hmm.
Or sometimes the stories go on a little longer than they used to.
Yeah. But when the chips are down, Joe
Joe
Biden is the guy.
Right, and you know what? And because of that, because he doesn't maybe have the energy he used to have, we've added a couple of people to the White House in order to help him
Mm.
in order to help manage the workload,
Yeah.
right? And I think most Americans would have understood that. I mean,
Mhm.
they've got aging parents.
Yeah.
A lot of people have aging parents or aging grandparents. I think they would have respected that. But no, you had to tell me that Joe Biden was actually doing 150 push-ups.
Yeah. No, Joe Biden is solving 1,000 math problems a day.
Right. I mean, all he's doing there is with Rubik's cubes,
Mhm.
throwing them up
Yeah.
completed Rubik's
Mhm.
cube.
Watch next week as Joe Biden competes in the Scripps National Spelling Bee.
Right, right. And by the way, and I think part of it to the people who are in defense of the people around Biden who
Mhm.
saw this happening, Biden had always told long stories
Yes.
that went nowhere.
And he always, and one of the things that in Democratic circles was a very popular, call it a justification, was Joe Biden always had a lisp. And he always had a lisp. And so whenever somebody would say, he stumbles over his words and he mutters, he doesn't sound good, you could say, well, he's just always had that speech impediment. And so it was things like, oh, well, he's always been Uncle Joe. He's always put his foot in his mouth. He's always had that speech impediment. Um, there were things that you could say to justify it in your mind.
To me, it was very clear though that I knew it was worse than that. I thought the Democrats could manage it, but I knew it was worse than that. And it was because when you looked at his eyes,
Yeah.
he has the eyes are too wide.
Mm-hmm.
And you see that in elderly people
Yeah.
when they are starting to lose it.
Mm-hmm. And I think that speaks to the debate, where a lot of people say, well, Joe Biden lost the debate in the election the minute he opened his mouth, and I don't believe that's true. He lost it the minute he shuffled on stage,
Yeah.
and he was white as a sheet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And it's funny. I mean, I like everybody else, every other person who really thought they were smart politically,
Mm-hmm.
said, debates don't matter.
Yes.
Debates never matter.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, we're gonna. Have you got 10 more minutes?
Yeah, I've got 10 more minutes.
Okay. Um, that debates don't matter. Of course, that debate bloody mattered.
Oh, yeah.
I hadn't watched a debate in a long time, and I was only watching, because I don't think they matter particular.
Mhm.
I only sat down to watch that debate for two reasons. One, I, I wanted to, I hadn't seen Trump in a debate
Mm-hmm.
in 4 years. I was curious to see how
Yeah.
he was going to perform. But mostly I was there to see, okay, can Biden get through an hour and a half?
Yeah.
And he couldn't get through 90 seconds.
No,
It was unbelievable.
and he couldn't get through 90 seconds, and then he got worse.
Yeah. My wife was in bed at the time, and every like 5 minutes or so, I kept walking into the room like, Hillary. My wife's name is Hillary. So you got to come see this. I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah. And then I remember at the end of the debate, they're arguing about their golf scores.
Yeah, which was the dumbest thing I've ever seen.
Which was maybe the worst political messaging in the history of political messaging is Joe Biden saying, well, I've got a better golf score than you do.
Well, and it's what's stupid about that. I mean, there's a lot of things that are stupid about that, right? And one of them is actually Donald Trump isn't a terrible golfer. I know Democrats want Donald Trump to be a terrible golfer because they want to make fun of him.
I mean, he golfs a lot. You should hope he's not a terrible golfer.
No, but I mean, for an old guy, he actually gets around pretty well.
Yeah.
And Biden doesn't have to be a good golfer.
Mm-hmm.
Joe Biden, you're just being who's a better president.
Actually, being president has little or nothing to do with being a good golfer.
Right. So anyway, it was very bizarre. And Trump knocked Biden out the moment he said, the moment he said, I have no idea what he just said.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think he has any idea what he just said.
And I like Trump. I think Trump was shocked and confused.
I think he was actually
and like thrown off his game by Joe Biden's appearance and by the things Joe
and by
Biden
the way,
was saying.
all to the better for Trump's debating.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, because Trump didn't get to his talking points.
Yeah.
And Trump was improvising the entire way.
Where and you look at the other debate, the debate that Trump ultimately had against Harris, which was a horrible debate for Trump. Where
The viewers.
and also the viewers, miserable. Well, that's the other reason why debates don't matter, is ultimately nobody can sit through the whole thing because they're miserable viewing experience.
The one exception is the Biden debate, because people wanted to see if he was going to live through it.
It's like watching a slow motion car crash. You can't turn your eyes away.
Right.
Whereas when Trump was on message in that second debate, it wasn't necessarily an appealing message to the voters he needed to win.
Well, but the thing is, the voters he needed to win weren't watching.
Yeah.
It didn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Trump knew that. Trump knew that the people who were watching that debate were his most intense partisans.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly think the reason so many people watch that initial debate, not the Harris-Trump debate,
Yeah.
but the Biden-Trump debate, is because most Americans, again, that's the first political debate I've watched in a very long time. I'm a political guy, and the first political debate I'd watched in a long time, mostly because I don't think they're purposeful. But I did think there was a useful test in that debate. We'd all heard enough about Biden slipping.
Yes.
And the test was, can Biden get through this? And I think Americans needed to see whether he could or not. And so that's why those numbers were so high. For that debate, because I think Americans were legitimately curious. There was an actual test that night.
Because in that speaks to Biden's staffing and the decisions the Biden staff made. That was the first time you got Joe Biden, not Joe Biden in a 90-second clip or Joe Biden in a carefully curated media environment. You got Joe Biden for an hour and a half in several years, like
facing a Grand Inquisitor,
facing a Grand Inquisitor. And so for Americans, it was the first opportunity to peek behind the veil and see what the wizard actually looked like.
Right.
And so when it was, and so when Joe Biden ultimately couldn't do it, you knew, oh, I have been sold a lie. Right. If you're a Democrat, you're thinking,
well, if you're an American.
Yeah.
Not just Democrats, if you're an American.
If you're an American, you're thinking, the people around the president lied to me.
So all right. How does that debate happen in Democratic circles? How do the Democrats agree to that debate?
Well, if you read the stories or the news stories that happened just after the debate, Biden insisted upon it. He said, I can take Trump on, and we need to dispel all of these rumors that I don't have it anymore. I need this debate, and I need it to happen early so we can just knock Trump's knees out from under him, and he never gets it back, and then we can just cruise through November. Biden insisted upon it. And it was political malpractice.
Because all right, I've heard that story. My suspicion, though, is that is because you don't have to do it. Just because the president insists on it, and you're his comms team or you're his political campaign team, you can come up with all sorts of reasons not to do it.
You're busy. You're busy being president.
Yeah.
You don't have time to go debate.
We'll debate him in October.
We'll
debate him in October. You know what? And that'll give, first of all, if you're the Democratic Party, if you're Joe Biden, the conventions haven't happened yet.
Yeah. The presidential campaign has barely started.
Yeah, the conventions haven't happened yet. So to me, a political advisor would say, all right, Joe, if you destroy Trump here in this debate, I know you're going to destroy Trump. You're the best debater. You're amazing.
Yeah.
Voters love you. Everybody loves you. You're going to destroy Trump. If you do destroy him, there's still 2 months for the Republicans to nominate somebody else.
Yeah. To go back, and now all of a sudden you're facing Nikki Haley.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you really want to face, we want to face Trump. Do we really want to do that? And then, or conversely, if you fall on your face, your party has enough time to replace you.
Yes. Or if that happened in October, well, it's too late. Biden's the nominee. Buck up, right. Democrat. Buck up, America. Yeah. It's this or Trump.
Right. And it's political malpractice. aside from the actual fact that there's this giant con going on that you've
Mhm.
allowed the American people to see in on.
Yeah.
But if you're if you're a political staffer and you have managed to contain Joe Biden's messaging for
Mhm.
2.5 years
Yes.
to protect the American people from the decline of Joe Biden.
And done not a totally successful job at it, but a reasonably successful job of it.
Yeah. Um, where you can plausibly argue, or you feel like you can plausibly argue that
Mhm.
this notion of this senile old man in the Oval
Mhm.
is a Republican hatchet job.
And most importantly, given the voters who don't want to vote for Trump an excuse to pull the lever for
Right.
Biden. You have created that excuse or that escape hatch in voters'
Right.
minds.
And so you have the control over Joe Biden, who has never necessarily liked being controlled,
Well,
but you manage to have the degree of control to do that.
yes.
And yet somehow you don't have the ability to control Joe Biden's desire for a 9 o'clock p.m. debate in Atlanta in June.
Yes.
Like, I don't understand. That doesn't pass my sift test.
I to this day, I agree with you. I don't really buy that official
I
story.
think it was a mole.
Yeah.
I legitimately think it was a mole
Oh yeah.
somewhere in the Democratic Party who said, who know Joe Biden wanted it.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, yeah, Joe, you should do this.
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they knew what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And they believed that Joe Biden, it better happen in June than to happen in October because they wanted to replace the candidate.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't necessarily think it went like they wanted it to after that,
Yes.
but that's the only explanation I can have
Mm-hmm.
because, like, somebody, like Jill Biden, somebody had to step in who has a better political sense at
Mm-hmm.
that point and a sense of where Joe is.
Yeah.
Had to know
Who
that.
saw Joe every day? Who and then my favorite part after the debate, they put out the story, oh, he had a cold. He had a cold. And that's otherwise Joe Biden's fine, but he just had a cold. And I'm thinking, that's the best you can come up with.
Right.
You have seen Joe Biden every day. You know what he's like. You did debate prep with him. You know how he was debating. You know how he walks. You know how he looks. And that was the best contingency you had in
You
place.
didn't have any contingency. You assumed he was going to win.
You assumed, and so that's the best plan you have in place on the off chance he goes out and falls flat on his face.
Right.
Your best excuse is he has a cold. How is there not a meeting where you workshopped that?
Where you war game that.
Yeah.
Right. It's like a political malpractice.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's I'm frustrated not because I'm a Democrat or because I'm a Republican or an American even.
Mm-hmm.
I'm frustrated because you are the political staff of the most powerful man in the world.
You get paid a lot of money to do that job.
Yeah, and you and I would have done a much better job.
Yeah, Rob and Jack, your friends here at the Politics in the Past Desert Dialogues podcast could have done that better than Joe Biden's well-paid professionals.
And that just invites the question of with that administration, if those were the people that have been hired to do the political jobs, what about the people who've been hired across the administration?
Yep. And like that's the through line of the Biden presidency is perhaps he had good intentions depending on your political ideology. But regardless of your political ideology, he did not staff those intentions out well at all.
Right. And there was no plan B for if either, in 2020, Joe Biden, it was clear he was becoming an old man,
Mm-hmm.
right? Doesn't necessarily mean that he was senile,
No.
but he was clearly, his stories went on a little longer than they used to.
Mm-hmm.
He was becoming an old man.
Yes.
And there needed to be that plan B for, okay, he can do the job today,
Mm-hmm.
but can he do the job in April of 2023?
The thinking was always, having watched that primary through Democratic eyes, the thinking was always, well, we'll nominate Biden. He can beat Trump. He serves one term, and then it's the next. It's one of these bright, fresh faces who occupy a Senate seat or a governor's mansion or who ran in this primary. It's Harris or it's Josh Shapiro or it's Gretchen Whitmer or it's who have you, but it's only Biden for one term.
He could have, I mean, if he had said that, he would have been a hero forever Democrats.
That's all he had to do, was just not run again. On 100 days into his presidential, the fact that 100 days into his administration, he didn't point at Kamala Harris and say, you know what, I'm out after one term. This is our person
Yeah.
going into 2024.
Or you don't even have to say that.
Mhm.
You can just say, listen, Vice President, Madam Vice President, just so you know, I am a one-term president.
Mhm.
I respect you.
Yeah.
I hope you do the job very well, but I'm telling you, I am going to stay neutral
Uh-huh.
because I think that this is a time for party renewal.
Yes.
And I don't think that I should put my finger on the scale one way or the other. That could change,
Mhm.
but yeah, I mean, he could have been
And in doing so, not giving her the immigration portfolio.
because that submarined her. That was about his power, not about the Democratic Party.
Yes.
But anyway,
Anyway.
right, we've gone on for far too long for this part of the stretch, meaning that the fact that we're hoping that we can wrap it up in one more conversation might be a little
Yes, we'll do our best.
but yeah. Anyway,
Right.
we'll be back soon. Thank
All
you
right.
very much, and
Thank
take
you.
care.